Hey, hey, hey.
Hello.
Got to get my glasses right. They were fogging up. That's not good. Anyway, yeah, man. So, good to see you. It's been 2 weeks.
Yeah, it has. Yeah.
Not much has happened, which is fine. We don't have much to cover. But no, it occurred to me because of the whole Israel thing, which has dominated everyone's mind in the media, at least for 7 weeks now, including mine, for sure. We have not, in 7 weeks, mentioned the two things that were like what the show was about. I mean, the only topics we ever talked about, Kanye West and Ukraine. We haven't even mentioned in 7 weeks, man.
Tomorrow is the 1-year anniversary of the InfoWars stunt.
Oh, it's already been a year?
Yeah.
Wow. That seems like a different era in world history. That's how strange politics was at that moment. Now, see, I mean, if there's any good thing about the Israel, Gaza thing is that, and Ukraine to a lesser extent, but certainly Israel, is that finally, at least we're talking about real issues. My God. I haven't seen any talk about drag queens on Twitter in many weeks. Not a mention, and it's a good thing. But yeah, no. So what is I can fill in everyone on what's been happening in Ukraine over the last 7 weeks.
Yeah.
But you need to fill in everyone on what Kanye West has been doing.
He's working on the new album with Ty Dolla $ign.
Okay.
Yeah. The rollout has been slow as per Kanye usual. There hasn't been as much pomp and circumstance about this, but he's back to making like secular music again. So he's no longer making gospel raps. He's cursing again. The single Vultures is out. I think it's on par with the rest of his work. Yeah.
He's cursing?
Yeah, he's cursing.
He's no longer a man of God?
I just fucked a Jewish bitch. How am I anti-Semitic? One new bar that only Kanye could pen.
Fucked a Jewish. Oh yeah, right. No. Pointing to the inherent contradictions in postmodern liberalism.
Exactly.
I got it. Yeah, no. So he's fucked a Jewish bitch. Okay, what else has he been up to?
Not being anti-Semitic. Because,
right.
Yeah. He's been in Dubai, Saudi Arabia. He's yeah, like that corner of the world really loves him for some reason.
Is he like running arms to the Palestinians or something? Like what's he doing there?
That would be really fascinating if he was. I wouldn't put it past him.
Didn't he rock a keffiyeh for a little while? Wasn't he like down? Didn't he have a little Palestinian joint going on? I thought maybe not. All right. But I mean, if you hate the Jews, next thing you know, you're signing up for the Al-Qassam brigades. So I could see it. That was a total joke of everyone. That's how several people who have been on my show who are depressing the shit out of me talk about it. If anti-Semites naturally want to like kill Israel rather than kill the Jews right next to him. Anyway. Okay, so this is good. He's desecular. He's cursing. He's making friends with Arabs. Yeah. All very positive developments.
He's
suppose if one wants, like a new caliphate, for instance, somewhere, which isn't that in the cards for Kanye? I mean, in terms of ambitions, isn't that kind of his scope?
I wouldn't put it past him to found a nation state.
Liberia wasn't enough, motherfuckers. Yeah.
He used to have the ranch in North Dakota. So
although given Kanye, like it may not even be like a black state. It could be, who knows? What would it be? Just an anti-Semitic state? Like what? Or what's Kanye's would be his national kind of the guiding ethos, the founding ethos of his nation state?
It would be Brazil. It would be
what? It would be. Question, Mr. Weimer, would it be a propositional nation state, meaning founded upon an idea like America, all men are created equal, or would it be more of the blood and soil type of state, where in one's ethnicity, one's connection to the land in deep ways determines one's citizenship vis-a-vis the state? Which do you think? Would he go for more the ethno state or more the philosophical state?
I don't think he's a black nationalist anymore, or I don't think. I mean, he's got the.
Did he ever know what that meant in any significant way? Like,
Well, I mean, his dad was a Black Panther. His parents were Black
okay,
Panthers.
all right.
Yeah.
Let me clear something up right quick. Okay, so every black guy in this country who is my age had his father was as a Black Panther. Every guy, and a lot of times their mothers were too. It's similar to people who are our grandparents' age who are French. Every single one of them was in the resistance. I don't know if you know that, or my grandparents. That whole generation, is a thing. It's like known, like every French person claimed to be in the resistance for decades after the war. So I don't believe it. I know his mom was an African American studies professor, and that's probably where he got most of his. I was going to say politics, but it's so incoherent. I would just say his thoughts concerning politics. He's just incoherent. That's the problem with Kanye.
Well, white. No, again, I just think he's ahead of his time. Constantly, he talks in the future, and
okay, so no ethno state for Kanye.
yeah, no ethno state, because white people have been too good to him.
Okay,
and
so
he's stolen a lot of white culture.
What kind of ideological proposition would he like his state to be founded upon? Something like all men are created equal, or perchance another set of ideas?
Probably some form of Christian nationalism. Anybody who affirms that Christ is king can probably live in Kanye's nation state.
And it'll be a nice bookend with the Jewish state. You have one of each.
Exactly. Yeah.
Where does he know? Where do you think he would want to place this state?
Yeah, I don't know. He might carve a little piece of Saudi Arabia out. I don't know.
Kanye stan.
Right
up in Saudi Arabia. Yep.
Yeah. Yay stan.
Mm-hmm. Well, no, I'm glad he's cursing. This is good. Mm-hmm. And I'm glad, I'll be interested to see what he does next. But it's funny, he hasn't weighed in, though, at all on Israel, has he?
Because he weighed in a year ago and he was vindicated.
About Israel?
Well, I mean...
Are you conflating Jews and Israel, motherfucker? We've gone over this.
Well, ask this particular Jews that he was complaining about what their position is on the state of Israel.
I know.
Yeah.
They're all named Lior and Avi and shit. I mean, it's not surprising. Yeah. They're
like
a lot of
in particular.
Well, no, actually, it's a thing in the music industry. There's a lot of Jews, of course, who are executives and owners, and I used to be friends with one of them, president of a fairly big label. But and through him, I found out that a lot of the executives in the music industry, at least as of 20 years ago, so it's probably still true, are not just Jews, but Israeli Jews. And what's his face? Lior, what's the biggest guy in music? Lior, what's his face? He's an Israeli Jew. The guy who did, I think he's Death Row, and he the one who made Dre and all that.
Oh, not him. Shoot, what's his name? It's at the tip of my tongue.
Lior something.
No, it's it's not that. NWA.
Well, I mean, there's several, is my point. Yeah. But no, the biggest one, I think the most powerful is Lior. Dang. It's Death Row Records. I'm pretty sure he's the guy behind Death Row. There's another Jewish guy I know you're thinking of who's in the NWA movie.
Well, yeah, Jerry Heller. I'm thinking
fucked them over. Different. No, he's way lower.
Mm-hmm.
The guy I'm thinking, Lee or someone chat it. Someone look it up. He's gigantic. Israeli, but a lot of them are. So yeah. So the beef Kanye has with the higher ups in the music industry, I'm now defending you, makes sense as both anti-Semitic and legitimately maybe anti-Israel. I don't know.
Well, his initial beef with the Jewish people got publicized when he had a beef with P. Diddy, who, once again, Kanye has been vindicated for his beef with P. Diddy, Puff Daddy, with the allegations coming out.
He's about to go to jail for sexual assault.
But Ye did the White Lives Matter stunts where he had a White Lives Matter hoodie, and then P. Diddy called him out for that, and then over text, and then Ye said, "Shut up! You don't care about my people. You work for Jews."
Is it P. Diddy now? There's been like 7 names. It was like Puffy, Puff Daddy, P. Diddy. Then there was just Diddy. Then there was Sean Combs. He went by for a while. What's the current status? What's the current status of the name?
I think Diddy. I think just the one word Diddy. His family.
Oh, yeah, that's what I thought he was at Diddy right now. He was just down to Diddy. Love that guy. One of the greatest musicians of my lifetime. And I mean it. Fuck it, man. If you lived in the 90s, if you were like lived through the 90s, especially if you lived in a big city, which I lived in New York in the 90s, and that shit, the Puff Daddy was just like bumping everywhere, and it was the best shit ever. And I missed that music, hip hop that was actually good, danceable, fun, had like rhymes. But I've never said this before on this show. All right, what are we going to talk about now? Did you look at the Charleston White video on Israel that was on the? Oh, you didn't look at that?
Oh, sorry.
You fuck. No, it's all right. You need to, because it's amazing. It's amazing. We don't have to play it now, but it's like 8 minutes. Charleston White, who normally most of the time I find kind of just dumb and gross and reactionary in really bad ways, kind of lays out like the hood take on Israel Palestine. And a lot of people might be amazed by this, but there is such a thing. Because of the black nationalists like the Panthers, et cetera, in the 60s, identifying really closely with the Palestinians, then quite a bit of that has gone down into sort of basic hood culture. So you'll hear it's not like people are obsessed about Palestine in East Oakland, but like, you know, it's not a foreign concept. I will say that. And then you'll see someone like Charleston White, all of a sudden, some dude from around the way completely, you know, with the flat brim hat on, just like bust out an 8-minute lecture on the history of Palestine, which is basically correct. And I was amazing. And within a whole analysis of the whole thing that I think is basically correct. Wild, but like told in a vernacular that is wildly different than anything else you will hear about Israel, Palestine, about foreign policy, about politics. It's truly what's that book, or what was the title? Hood philosophy or something. I mean, it's really like, I don't know what an anthropologist would call it, like vernacular intelligence or something. It's wild, but check it out. There's an identification with the Palestinians that goes pretty deep for a lot of reasons. If you look at any video of the West Bank, it's clearly like apartheid, Jim Crow. But we don't need to talk about Israel. Let's talk about black people. We got them. Okay, that's done. Then Ukraine. All right. And let's like broaden the focus.
Oh,
go ahead.
Well, I wanted to talk about the great man of history theory. Yeah, I think that's what ties a lot of our stories together.
That's so funny. That's the theory. That's one of a few things that I have changed my mind on radically. So when you come up on the left, Marxian-ish, whatever, just with that sort of general orientation, you are trained from the jump to like completely dismiss the great man theory of history. The idea that individuals alone, essentially, through their force of will, changed the course of history, reshaped social relations and social structures, and created nations and caused wars and all that. That if you want to understand why Europe is the way it is today, with the borders where they are and the people in it who are there, you need to study the 10 or 20 or 30 or 50 great men in European history, because they're the ones who determined that largely. That's the great man theory of history. And so we as leftists were raised to think that that can't be true, because everything that is historically significant was caused by masses of people, in particular classes of people. So it doesn't happen in the leftist view of history. No significant historical change happens without mass transformations. So the way they would explain, for instance, the New Deal, like why we have welfare in this country, is the Communist Party, they'll say this, organized lots of people, and unions organized lots of people, and there were protests in the streets, and there were massive strikes, all of which is true in the 1930s. And that's why we had welfare, because then Franklin Roosevelt was forced to sign the legislation creating Social Security, et cetera. I mean, there's a lot to that. That would be like the structuralist argument. And I think, I certainly don't dismiss that. And I would always place that in my I do place those things in my calculations when I come down with a thesis about history. But the more I think about it, and just the more I've changed my thinking on these things, and I'm really curious what you think, although I kind of have a guess, is that no, Franklin Roosevelt. And when I teach the history of the New Deal, I start when he's 14 years old. The New Deal's in the 30s. Franklin Roosevelt is a teenager in the 1890s. I go straight there. That's the beginning. I say the New Deal starts here. Because why? Because it started in, actually more like the World War II, but both World War II and the New Deal started in the mind of this little kid. He was a kid. He was 14 years old in high school, writing essays about how he wanted to go to war with Japan. And he never stopped. He kept wanting to go to war with Japan ever since. And then he had ideas about a welfare state. So, and that's the origin. That's the origin of the great historical transformation of the modern American welfare state. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't just him, but it was the minds of him and other, very important progressives who became politicians and senators and congresspeople and state legislators who then enacted these laws. But, a handful of, quote, great or important, and they were mostly men. It's also comports with my more Hegelian view rather than a Marxian view of history, right? To me, everything proceeds from ideas. Like ideas make history, just as I said. It was the ideas in Franklin Roosevelt's head from his beginnings that were the original cause of much of what happened in the 20th century. So rather than the Marxist, which I used to get so frustrated with as a Marxist, I used to get and it felt so dead because it never happened. The Marxist, if you're going to be like a really pure Marxist, you wait around for the material conditions to change, for immiseration to set in among the working classes, for them then to launch a rebellion that becomes a revolution. The classes, millions of people, have to change their minds and take action for it, for history to change. So to jump in and say, hey guys, I got a great idea. How about a revolution? That makes you Lenin. And then you get a really perverted view edition of socialism. That's the argument. But no, I think Lenin, the reason we had the Soviet Union was because Lenin and Trotsky were quite literally sitting around in Vienna, wherever they were hanging out, on a couch, and we're like, yo, we need like a communist revolution in Russia. I mean, they may not have said yo, but I'm pretty sure that's what happened. And then we got it. So yeah. What's your view?
Yeah, I think it's like something that's self-evidently true almost. Yeah, I think, your early career is kind of a takedown of the theory or a positing of a new theory, but with your postmodernist view of people being able to create their own realities and enforce that on the rest of the world,
it
seems pretty obvious that there are men throughout history that accomplished that.
Right.
And there's a reason why we talk about these people. It's relevant now because the Napoleon movie came out, and it seems like
Did you see it?
I haven't seen it yet. I know
I did.
Yeah.
Yes. Terrible. No one should go. No,
Okay.
Don't go. Well, I mean, I would say the battle scenes are pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Just as battle scenes. They're not like otherwise interesting. And there's one particular battle. There's a debate about whether this really happened, in which he launches cannonballs onto this frozen lake that the enemy is on, and they all drown. And it's this very spectacular scene. It may not have happened. Anyway, that's maybe worth it, but that's like 10% of the movie. The rest of it's so fucking boring. I wanted to leave. It's just like,
is it true that he's, instead of, the great man theory of history, what some people would call the small penis theory of history, that he stumbles through his conquests motivated by his sexual inadequacy, and he's
Right.
really dominated by Josephine, his lover. And
Right. So we have the materialist Marxist version of history. We have the great man version of history, and then we have what you're describing as which it is the feminist version of history. Yeah, the great men. This is the feminist response to great men. The great men were actually really insecure, and this is why they were so mean and hurt so many people. It's, I don't know. I also can't stand looking at Joaquin Phoenix. It's just an unpleasant experience, the whole thing. Yeah, Phoenix, I mean, he portrays Napoleon. I mean, there's some weird, this sort of sexual shit. Like apparently Napoleon was quite horny, and although they don't really spend much time on that, it's really just a lot of just plodding around, like talking about, going to war or something. It's not interesting. Yeah. Would the 19th century and the 20th century and today's world look different if Napoleon, that one dude, were never born? Of course. Like, yeah.
If he didn't have this grand motivation and this grand vision to make France great again, bring back the church, and conquer as much of Europe as possible, like that was his vision. And the
law in Guadeloupe and Martinique and Haiti to this day is derived from the Napoleonic Code, which was his idea to make uniform all the French territories, all the French colonies, to make one giant global empire in which everyone was assimilated into the French culture that he had created. This is his set of ideas about what French culture is, what France is, and then that it should be imposed upon the entire rest of the world. Dude was the OG globalist, just maniacal shit, megalomaniacal, coming right out of the French Revolution with Rousseau's ideas, the Jacobins' ideas about just this thing, about one universal political entity in which everyone agrees and everyone is the same. And if they're not the same or they don't agree, they have to be either exiled, this is what Rousseau says, or maybe something worse. And then Rousseau also says in that book, amazingly, this is before the French Revolution, he's talking, he says, there will be issues and conflicts, and there will be many people who will not agree with the social contract of this political entity post-revolution. And so what will happen inevitably is that, and this is Rousseau saying this, a prince will emerge who will then lead the nation, but he will always be guided by the general will, because Rousseau and the Jacobins, the French revolutionaries, of course, were arch egalitarians. This is where communists got their ideas from, was from the French revolutionaries, arch egalitarians. But no, Rousseau's like, actually, you're probably going to need like a dictator. In fact, we're going to call him the prince. I know we're against the monarchy, but it's going to be lo and behold, like immediately after the French Revolution, basically, here comes Napoleon taking power over the entire world, or at least attempts to. Yeah, but yeah, so, I mean, think of all the great conquerors and emperors, all of them. They all reshaped the planet. So yeah, now this brings us to a news item.
Well, yeah, if there was a great man, I was going to say it's Henry Kissinger, like as far as somebody who imposed their will on the world, right?
Right. And what did dude do? I mean, he did serve in the Navy during World War II. But other than that, all he did was sit at a desk and think. Henry Kissinger's ideas, of course, changed history radically. And many people do say killed 3 to 4 million people. Yeah, so Kissinger is dead, 100 years old. And what you're seeing all day long is predictable. I've seen maybe one exception to this, which kind of surprised me. But, so CNN, MSNBC, yada, yada, might say Kissinger has been criticized for, the secret bombing in Cambodia, for the Allende overthrow in Chile, for all the things, all the crimes. but great statesman who changed the arc of history and considered one of our great diplomats. Yep. And then of the left, and this is actually, believe it or not, who I'm more I'm pissed off about. I'm going to say something that's going to surprise some people, but yeah. So they're saying, of course, he's one of the great war criminals of all time, one of the great mass murderers, one of the greatest monsters in American history. They love calling him immoral and amoral. They love talking about Kissinger's lack of morality. And yeah, Christopher Hitchens wrote a whole book about, it's called The Trial of Henry Kissinger, and it's just one long indictment saying all the things I just said about Henry Kissinger. Hitchens had a particular grievance against Kissinger and did believe him to be one of the greatest war criminals of all time. I feel like you have a take on this. Do you know where I'm going?
Oh,
probably not.
Maybe.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever really said this publicly.
Well, when we've been talking about Kissinger, it's been kind of positive in his takes, and that he's actually been a more realist.
Yeah, it's deeper and darker than that. Yes. So, okay. Yes, Henry Kissinger, his policies that he advocated for, President Nixon, of course, and Ford were the ones to implement them. But yes, they were totally his ideas. Yes, I believe in the great man theory of history. Yes, I give him credit and responsibility for whatever flowed from those ideas. Yeah, they killed probably something like somewhere between 2 and 4 million people in Southeast Asia, in Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos. And, Cambodia, that alone is like definitely one of the greatest atrocities. The bombing campaign of Cambodia by the United States, one of the greatest atrocities.
Completely cruel.
Oh, yeah. Like no one argues against this. Even worse than that, like, I think everybody who studies the history of this agrees that also gave rise to the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia, who were like the most psychotic communists ever in history, led by Pol Pot, who then proceeded to kill 1 million of his own people, and stacks of skulls. And people, I hope, have seen stuff about this or read stuff about the killing fields in Cambodia. But a lot, I mean, of course, the Cambodians had agency in this, but, they needed, for such a fanatical, psychotic communist movement to arise from a place, you had to create conditions of such misery that people were absolutely desperate, similar in some ways to Gaza. But yeah, that came from Henry Kissinger's little head, his little ideas, his great man ideas produced that. And that's just one of many things. So yes. Now the thing is, all right. I mean, you bet Henry Kissinger, I'll raise you a Harry Truman. You want to compare and by the way, Harry Truman is the one who actually pushed the buttons. Henry Kissinger just said we should do this.
This is the take, I think. I think I'm with you on this. It is weird how much disdain the modern left has for Henry Kissinger, and how many people are cracking bottles of champagne right now. And he's finally dead. We finally got him. This is great. Breaking out the cigars. But I think
it serves a very dark purpose, actually, that the left isn't even aware of.
It's not FDR's fault. It's not Harry Truman's fault. It's not JFK's fault. It's not LBJ's fault. It's not Jimmy Carter's fault.
Most importantly, right. It's also part of this. I have to breathe before I say this because I get so. It's also part of the JFK cult, which I am just so sorry to say includes many, many, many of the very smartest people I know on these very issues. It's heartbreaking, and I'm eventually going to bring this stuff to their attention. But yeah, it is also a way to make Vietnam, and this is, I think, its primary function, and this is the problem with it, the vilification of Kissinger and treating him as a uniquely evil U.S. foreign policy provider is that it makes Vietnam, and this is what leftists and liberals always do, it makes Vietnam into Nixon's war. When, JFK, as I've said many times, increased the number of, he put combat troops for real into Vietnam for the first time in the thousands, and had plans to continue the war, and we can discuss this. But yeah, and then LBJ, of course, then promptly escalated it and made it into 500,000. He put 500,000 troops on the ground by the time I was born in 1965. And the rest is history. That's LBJ and Kennedy's war. And ask David Halberstam, who is a totally liberal New York Times journalist who wrote a whole book called The Best and the Brightest about John F. Kennedy's cabinet. They were the best and the brightest. These professors from Harvard, all of them were basically, who came up with the idea, the great men, the idea of the Vietnam War. Robert McNamara being the most important of them. So yeah, there's been this whole attempt, and liberals, I should say, do this. Leftists are smarter than this, but liberals do this all the time. They talk about, it's amazing. When they talk about the Vietnam War, they never mention Johnson and Kennedy. It's always Nixon. You hear about Nixon and Kissinger and all their crimes. It's unbelievable. So it's a way of, I'm not going to say smearing Republicans, although that's part of it, but it's more about evading.
It's scapegoating him for all the crimes of U.S. foreign policy, essentially.
Yeah, right. When it's in fact your own fucking party and your own heroes who did all of the big killing, all of it. I mean, if you want to find like an insignificant Democrat president, he will be someone who didn't kill many people. Oh, like Jimmy Carter. Funny how that happens. I mean, the great ones, the ones that they love, they have the highest body counts in history. Lincoln, Wilson, Roosevelt, Truman, and they also love Johnson. They just don't say it, but they love Johnson because what they do is they advocate for all of Johnson's policies all the time, except for the Vietnam one. Yeah, it's their way. The vilification of Henry Kissinger is their way of diverting blame, essentially, for the Vietnam War on the Republicans. I mean, when it was completely a Democrat war, as Bob Dole said. The other thing it does, which is also quite bad, and this is where a lot of good people are missing this. Henry Kissinger, philosophically, ideologically, was not the worst. He wasn't the greatest, but he wasn't the worst. In fact, I think any anti-war person who's like a leftist or a libertarian, I think, and certainly any sort of realist, like the geopolitical realists I've been hanging out with lately, all of us would pick Henry Kissinger over damn near any other foreign policy advisor of the last 100 years, because all of them, except for him, pretty much, have been what's called idealists or American exceptionalists or American global imperialists. You pick your words, but the idea that America should be the savior of the world, and that's a word they actually use. The Samantha Powers of the world, all that. But those have come in Republican and Democrat flavors, and they have like different rhetoric, but they all seek the same thing, which is American global domination and the creation of a global American culture that's run from Washington, D.C. And that just became set of ideas, unfortunately, became identified with neoconservatives when it's not just them. Neocons have their own particular take on that. But that's been every president, except for Trump, every president and damn near every senator for 150 years has subscribed to that idea of the United States of America as being the savior nation. Kissinger wasn't about that. He said it straight up. And that's one of the things I really appreciate about Kissinger. He was quite frank, very honest, even right up until he was dead. Just this last year, he made statements against the Ukraine war. And he has many times criticized Israel. Not when he was actually in power, what he did was Kissinger is the one who stopped them from killing everybody. During the Yom Kippur War, he's the one who stepped in it because they wanted to slaughter an entire, I think it was a brigade of Egyptian soldiers. It was something like 2,000 men, something like that. Or no, many thousands of men. I think a brigade's more than that. It was some large unit of Egyptian soldiers were like trapped in the Sinai. They were encircled by the IDF. And they were saying to Kissinger, we want to wipe these guys out entirely. Just a complete massacre. And he said, no, you can't. And the reason you can't is because I won't give you any more weapons if you do. And he did that repeatedly with the Israelis. He was always pulling the leash back. That's how I always think of Israel. It's the attack dog over there. It's a pit bull, and the United States has the leash. And sometimes they let the leash go. They never let it off the leash. Sometimes they let the leash go a little bit, lengthen it, and sometimes they pull it in. Kissinger was always restraining the Israelis, and he gave this famous speech, which I've referenced many times in 1975, telling them, fuck you, we run things. Israel doesn't get to decide shit. So a very realist idea. Most people nowadays talk about Israel as, oh, it's the shining beacon of democracy in the Middle East. That's why our values are aligned with the Israelis and the Israel state. And this is why we're all Zionists. No, Kissinger was a complete realist. Realpolitik is the foreign policy philosophy that he subscribed to and in many ways created. I'd say he did create it. He certainly popularized it. And yeah, it is. He actually, believe it or not, I was thinking about this philosophically. Amazingly, Henry Kissinger is a member of my family tree. Philosophically. Yeah, because he's the realist. He's a realist, and that's who's over here. All the rest of them are idealist imperialists, and that's a different family.
Well, you could trace modern America firstism back to Henry Kissinger. It goes Henry Kissinger and then Pat Buchanan being a speechwriter for Nixon at the time. And
yeah, I mean, so again, I think they're all the same family, yes, but I think it's not quite as direct a lineage. I don't think Kissinger begat those dudes, but I think they're like cousins. They're kind of, they have essentially the same analysis, which is that we should treat foreign relations, our relationships with other countries, not according to some universalistic set of ideas and ideology, like all men should be created equal in all across the world, and everyone should live in a democracy, and there should be LGBTQ rights everywhere. No, they say, no, it's about our own national security, number one, and prosperity. That's it. And both those things require, here's the rub, military strength. Was the argument by Kissinger and his brand of realpolitik, and that's where he would diverge from other people who are realists. Yeah, and so he genuinely believed that if here's the difference. LBJ said, what we're going to do in Vietnam is we're going to bring the TVA, the Tennessee Valley Authority, which was the New Deal's biggest project, to the Mekong Delta. And then Kissinger was like, no, fuck no, we're actually going to get out of this war. And that's the other thing people don't realize. Yes, he killed 1 million people on the way out, maybe 2 million on the way out of the war. But that was his and Nixon's whole plan from the jump, was to hand it over to the Vietnamese, to the South Vietnamese, was called the Vietnamization of the Vietnam War, which they did. They immediately started pulling out combat troops. All those troops that LBJ had put in there in the field, getting slaughtered and slaughtering, Nixon and Kissinger immediately started withdrawing those troops and started giving more responsibility to the South Vietnam. He also increased the bombing to compensate for taking out the ground troops. And, I hate that. That's just a big, giant, cowardly war crime. That's sort of the equivalent of what Israel's doing right now in Gaza times 10. It's sort of a cowardly way of being an imperialist. We're not going to send our troops in, but we'll use our superior air power to just punish them until they give up. But anyway, but yeah, no, he did then. They did end the war. The war ended on their watch. They're the ones who finally pulled everybody out, and that was the plan. And my point is that was horrendous and one big fat set of war crimes by Henry, but better than if LBJ had stayed in office with his globalist, universalist, imperialist, American exceptionalist maniacs who wouldn't stop and haven't stopped. until they see one giant Pax Americana, one giant American world in which we have a military base in every country or multiple military bases in every country. Everybody trades with us on our terms. And yeah, and they elect the correct people in their elections. So Kissinger is preferable, is my point, to all the rest of these psycho evangelicals who have run American foreign policy for 150 years.
I think any libertarian should ask themselves, who would you rather have running American foreign policy right now, Henry Kissinger or Tony Blinken?
And they are, I mean, it is a form of ideology, I suppose, but it's so self-interested. It's barely an ideology. It's just simply Henry Kissinger, fled the Holocaust with his family when he was a young child, right? So they chose this country, and it was really that. It was sort of that. I think the realpolitik ethos at heart is the country you find yourself living in, for whatever reason, you should make it is in your interest to make that country as powerful and as wealthy as possible. And that's what Henry Kissinger set out to do for the rest of his life. It's just unfortunate that he was born or ended up living in a country that was engaged in in the first global nuclear superpower contest. It's a real shame he wasn't around in the 90s or something. But
right now on Twitter, everybody's sharing pictures of Henry Kissinger embracing the devil in hell. But I wanted to share this with you. This is another version of Henry Kissinger's afterlife. This is him in the kingdom of heaven, brokering a peace deal between God and the devil. And you might recognize the devil there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, wait. Okay, hold on. What's happening? Where's Kissinger?
Kissinger is in the king position, I believe.
Oh,
the king in the middle.
Who's?
I believe that's God on the left and the devil on the right.
Right. Who's God though? Is he just God, or does he represent somebody else?
I think it's just a white man, this guy with a beard.
Who is this genius? My God. Who the hell? Wow, Kennedy is the devil.
Yeah.
No one believes that except for me. No, he wasn't the devil. He was just one of many devils.
Thanks to Cremu and the technology of AI art for that vision right there.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So, but I would say most specifically though, yeah, it lets off the hook all those Democrat, progressive, imperialist murderers. But especially for the Vietnam War. Henry Kissinger was the one who ended the Vietnam War. The way he did it was horrendous, but he did, which is a lot better than starting and creating and fostering and escalating the Vietnam War, which is what the most progressive Democrats in American history did.
The chat has been great so far. Our first comment was a super chat from the Fountainhead Forum, a Randian group. Also ties into the great man of history. They say they have 25 shows talking about Javier Milei. Might be the most Anglophone show with Milei coverage. So check out the Randians over at the Fountainhead Forum talking about Javier Milei. I think that also plays into the great man of history thing, is that all these populists are rising up, and people are rallying behind who they see to be a great man.
Right. Populist movements usually, not always, but usually do form around one particular figure, and there ends up being somewhat of a cult of personality. And by the way, cults of personality are not necessarily bad or even dumb or wrong, but they tend to do that. Yes, they prove in themselves the great man theory of history, right? They sort of demonstrate what it is. So Milei, I haven't researched sufficiently yet. I mean, I obviously know many things about the guy. I just have been allergic to dude since the jump. I can't stand him. And it's on an aesthetic level. It is, his personality is sandpaper to me. And then, of course, more substantively and more importantly, I mean, his whole thing about Judaism, and then of course Israel, and I think he's bad on Ukraine also, isn't he?
Yep,
And
yeah.
and then the very first meeting he has basically is with Bill Clinton.
Mhm.
Okay, are we done with our little libertarian fantasies now, guys? Man, libertarians have just no, I shouldn't say that. A lot of them have been great and very consistent, but boy, there've been some dummies. And this is one case where that's true. You know, I think part of the problem is that a lot of libertarians don't have a left-wing background, because if you do, you know all about this experience of some hero coming out of nowhere who's like a radical, who's on your team, who then like somehow manages to win an election somewhere, and everybody gets so excited. And then there's like this little faction that's always saying, yeah, watch, as soon as he gets into power, he's going to sell out. Watch. And it's happened just so many times. And that's sort of what's happened to Bernie Sanders in the long arc. You should hear like Bernie supporters talk about him now. They hate his guts, especially about Israel. But all right. So yeah, he's clearly a globalist. And also, please tell me more. He's like what's World Economic Forum hanging out. I mean, bad shit.
So libertarians like him because he criticizes their national bank and he wants to get rid of their national bank.
And he wants to eliminate like all of the government departments, right?
Yeah,
all the welfare shit.
Bureaucracies, yeah.
Yeah, which I'm sure I would agree with, by the way. In large part, at least. Yeah. Probably all of it, but yeah, certainly in large part. Yeah, I like that, but like, okay. What else though? What else do we know about this guy?
Well, it's funny. Fisted by Foucault pointed out that he is the great grandson of World War II Croatian dictator Ante Pavelic, who escaped to Argentina in 1946.
Is Fisted here?
No, but
oh, a Twitter celebrity. I was so flattered. Okay, what does that tell us?
Oh, I mean, what Fisted said is that explains his support of Israel and the supposed genocide of the Palestinians.
Oh,
that he has brutal fascist dictator roots built.
He needs to go take a tour of the West Bank.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, seriously. But
the criticism of smarter libertarians who see this Judas goat kind of coming is that he's serving the global banks at the expense of the national banks. Is that he's an IMF, World Economic Forum guy, and wants to reform Argentina economically so that they can pay off their debt to the global banks and ascend in the Western liberal order. He's rejected BRICS. I think that's something that's important in all this, that he's pretty staunchly pro-West, pro-NATO, pro-international globalist order.
I cannot believe that right now, you know what I was thinking? I was thinking, I hope Lula just destroys this guy. I mean, through whatever, just through the competition, the rivalry, or maybe trade deal. I don't know. However he could. I found myself rooting for Lula, like a social democrat, socialist type. Comes out of like a communist trade union. I'm rooting for him now, me, against the anarcho-capitalist who happens to be president of Argentina. I'm like, I can't stand this guy, Milei. And Lula is correct on big stuff. And international relations is always the big stuff. That's always number one. Lula's right on Ukraine. I think he's right on Israel. And he's certainly right on NATO. And he's, a leader of BRICS. And he's been one of the most active leaders of BRICS. Probably maybe second after Russia. I mean, he's been really pushing the BRICS thing, which is awesome, and also Michael Brooks, RIP, taught me a few things about Lula. Michael that was his really big cause, was Lula. And he met with him many times. I think he wrote a book or an article or a lot of stuff about Lula. And he kind of educated me. I mean, he's a commie. He's less murderous than most. I don't know. And he, as I said, on foreign policy, which is all I should really care about as an American, he's very good. Milei, is the flip of that, right? He's, from my perspective, probably very good on domestic issues, cutting all this bureaucracy. I'm sure he's going to slash taxes. Great. I'm all for that. If that's really what happens and it's not some bullshit privatization scheme, which is actually all government run, which is like a lot of what Chile was with Kissinger after Kissinger did what he did, put in Pinochet. A lot of it was sort of like privatized, but like not really. Wasn't really a free market. But then Milei is gonna do something like that, which is gonna be an improvement, I'm sure. But then he's gonna be just sounds like the what would you call him? Puppet or something nastier for the globalists. I mean, for the US, for the United States. He's our boy.
Yeah. Now, libertarian realist argument against this would be Argentina is not a superpower, and so foreign affairs isn't that big of a deal. It's not like they have the power that the United States has to exert its will on Ukraine and Israel in a substantial way. And if you can reform his country, he's you'd like him in that he's recommended Spooner's "Vices Are Not Crimes" essay.
Has he really?
Yeah. And he has that view of a lot of what people would call victimless crime.
He's gonna be on Michael Malice's show pretty soon, I bet.
Yeah, he's been on Tucker, so
he's that kind of libertarian. He's very much a Malice libertarian. Mm-hmm. Wow. Okay.
But if he just improves the material circumstance of his citizens in Argentina, that's all you could really ask for, and that should be enough.
Okay, right. So the realist libertarian defense of him would be, it's a weak country. He can't stand up to the United States and NATO. He has to, get his bread buttered where everyone else does. You won't survive if you become an enemy of the United States. And that's an interesting point, actually. And I wonder if he's done that self-consciously. I wonder if he's thought to himself, oh, let's see, Venezuela, Chavez said, fuck you to the United States. And Bolivia, Morales said, fuck you to the United States. And Nicaragua said before that, fuck you to the United States with Ortega. And look what happened to all three of those countries. So I'm not going to go that way. I'm going to be rich instead and hang out with the Americans and the Jews. I mean, it's shrewd. It's a clever strategy. It's just not exactly what Ron Paul would do. Mm-hmm. So I'm saying libertarians, especially the Ron Paul generation, the beautiful thing about them and about Ron Paul is they're as principled as Jesus Christ. I mean, that's Ron Paul's thing, I mean, he just sat up there in Congress for 30-something years saying no to every single bill, no matter what people said about him. He had no support, no friends, but he still kept doing it. Very much a Christian, Christ-like figure. Milei, it sounds like I don't know, not so much a principled clearly not a principled. What's Bill Clinton doing there? Bill Clinton's not president anymore, by the way. That's just absolute abject servitude, submission to the powers that be, right? I mean, was that the Clinton Foundation that he was representing on this meeting?
I think so.
Clinton, what's it called? Clinton Initiative, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Oh, so he's just inviting in the biggest gangsters in the world. I mean, the Clintons, they have famously fucked over Haiti. They were trying to get their tentacles into Ukraine too. I think they did, in fact. Man. Milei, it's not just that he's like doing business with the US, which I can understand. He seems to be throwing himself at the Western powers, Israel too. What's that about?
Mm-hmm. So
it's a filthy little ethno state.
The people in the chat is saying Ron Paul would get Assanged or be martyred essentially, and that libertarians like that don't really win substantial victories. Thomas Massey, following in the tradition of Ron Paul, was the one no vote in the House resolution.
Saw that.
Yeah.
Saw that. Oh, speaking of libertarian Congress people, though, we are now down to one, because did everyone see what Mike Lee said on Twitter about the Dresden firebombing and the Tokyo firebombings?
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah. It's another one of these.
So actually, yeah.
Another one of these invocations of those things as reason that bombing Gaza is justified. But those are considered to be war crimes, guys. And you're invoking that. We wanted, the whole point of this post-World War II reckoning was that we all decided that things like firebombing cities full of civilians and killing tens of thousands of them in one night is not okay and should not be allowed. It's not lawful under international law. It's incredible. Like, they're trying to make that into something that was necessary and just. It never was. No one ever considered the bombing of Dresden to be necessary, and certainly not the firebombing of Tokyo and 30 other cities in Japan. Oh my God. Those are the worst war crimes in history. I mean, yeah, millions killed. Yeah. Amazing. But anyway, so yeah, that was Mike Lee, Mr. Libertarian from Utah. Great on the Constitution and the First and Second Amendments. Yes, sure. But Mike, bro, that's not libertarian at all. That's so horrific that we're now like having to, we are now in the position of having to argue against people who want to reenact the firebombing of Dresden. That's what they're saying. We need to do another firebombing of Dresden. Only this time, it'll be all children and they'll be trapped in the city. But we need to do it. That's what's happening. I can't.
Yeah, you mentioned the left having a history of being disappointed by leaders.
Yeah.
I think right-wingers would do well to notice this trend as people that their enemies hate, like Milei, like Meloni in Italy, end up being just globalist shills like everybody else. And you get this illusion of choice because with these populists that turned out to be backed and supporting the globalist order.
The most important thing, I think, for anyone and everyone in regards to politics is to avoid identifying with our political leaders in any way. Because once you do that, they can take advantage of you however they want. And you will find yourself out in the cold or sent to a foreign land to fight and die, or giving your tax money over happily or your land over happily to the government because the good guy's running it. It's they will snatch your child and send them off to war faster than anything once you identify with the political leadership in your country. Don't do it. This is actually how wars have started. We know this. I mean, as I said, through cult of personality around national leaders who then send them to war. Yeah, it's the worst thing to do. And then intellectually, it's also a disaster because you no longer think clearly and rationally about political issues. You think about it through that tribal lens, through that identification through the leader of the tribe, the political tribe. You just think about all the issues. You go through that lens first. It atrophies the mind, makes people stupid. It's incurious, it's anti-intellectual, and it's boring too. It's everyone, this is what I've preached for decades. It's the politics of disassociation with power, I guess you could call it, or something. But yeah, I mean, just don't doesn't mean you can like politicians. You can certainly like particular ideas or particular policies for sure. You know, like I like most of Ron Paul's policy ideas, but I have no particular feeling about Ron Paul. I never considered myself at all a part of it. I just like a lot of his stuff, but and that's the healthy way to go. Mm-hmm. So, and you also get screwed over all the time. I mean, as we're talking about now, and that's why the libertarians are watching Milei invite Bill Clinton to his house and whatever, and how leftists constantly have been disappointed with their Messiah of the Month. So yeah, don't do it. I mean, I approach politics like you approach the world as a consumer. I completely consumer politics is the way to go. Just who has what to offer you, and are they worth your vote, or are they worth your support? Are they worth your affection? Whatever. That's it. Just straight business analysis, cost benefit analysis. That's how you decide on politics and who's worthwhile in politics, electoral politics. Let's talk about Ukraine.
Okay.
Because it's been a while, 7 weeks. Yeah, and some wild shit's happened. I don't know if you've been following this or heard about this at all, but pretty crazy shit's happening. But the main thing that's happening is that the Western political and intellectual elite have essentially declared the war over, and they've declared Ukraine to be the loser. I mean, there have been many, many, many establishment outlets and people who were staunchly pro-Ukraine saying just that. It's over. Ukraine lost. We have to move on. So that means it's over. And that means that Ukraine cannot win. And that's all. The other thing people are saying, I mean, the Wall Street Journal has said this. When the Wall Street Journal said that, we all knew it was over. They also say that Ukraine cannot win. But if they have no U.S. support, they certainly can't win. So the most incredibly, again, it's like World War I tragedy level. I mean, it's reminding me of those battles at the very end of World War I when they were negotiating the times of the truce of the ceasefire, and it kind of shifted back and forth. And there were like unit commanders who would like send out their troops to fight to gain like 100 yards at the last minute before the truce was called, so they could increase their territory and become war heroes. I mean, and then kill hundreds of young men for that purpose. I mean, that level of corruption is what's going on here. They're fighting one of the most vicious battles of the war so far right now. Avdiivka. It's this fortress city. It's one of the big, most heavily defended cities in the east. Russia's been pounding the shit out of it for a week or two, I think, getting close and actually making advances. Check this out. Donetsk, the Donbass, the main industry is mining. And so lots and lots of men who live there are miners. And then a lot of the military men who are in the Donbass, meaning on the Russia side, are miners. You know what they did with Avdiivka, the way they broke through? They spent months, I think, or maybe even longer. Miners from the Donbass dug tunnels all the way under, surreptitiously, no one knew this was going on, all the way underneath Avdiivka to the backs, and then came out from the backside. And then I think they blew up the tunnels underneath all the Ukrainian emplacements. So they just collapsed. I don't know, just all sorts of battlements and armor and men, and it was just wild shit. Anyway, so they said Bakhmut was going to be the final pivotal battle. But this seems to be another pivotal battle. I'm not exactly sure how this happened, why this is going on. But yes, Avdiivka is a very heavily defended city. It's gonna fall just like Bakhmut. Russia's destroying it, but they're dying every day, like dozens, I think, of mostly Ukrainians. The numbers now are, on the Russian side, it's between 30 and 40,000 dead. On the Ukrainian side, now most people on all sides, if you take all the estimates together, the range is 2 to 400,000 dead Ukrainians. The front line has essentially not changed. It's still the same 20% of Ukraine that Russia has controlled since the second month of the war, which is the Donbass in the east and Crimea in the south. But you have the West declaring, basically calling for surrender, and that means it's over because it's the West's war. Ukraine is not giving up, though, because the government there is becoming increasingly fanatical, and it was fanatical to begin with, and that's why the war started. The most fanatical elements have not been in the Zelensky government. They've been in the military. That's where you find all the major Nazis, like in the Azov Brigade, and not just there, but across the military in Ukraine. And you will find it actual Nazi sympathy in the highest commander of the Ukrainian military, Mr. Zaluzhny, the head of the Ukrainian military, who apparently wants to take over the country. How do we know that? Because 4 weeks ago, his top aide, the deputy commander, I guess under him, was having a birthday party, and someone handed him a gift, and he opened it up, and it was a grenade. And he blew himself up, and I think he might have killed his son too in doing this. And believe it or not, the Ukraine side, the pro-Ukrainians, like on Twitter, are saying it was just a dumb accident, that he just, was goofing around with a live grenade and accidentally blew himself up and his son up. But most people are saying, no, this is the Zelensky team telling him, you're not going to try, telling Zaluzhny, this is what's going to happen to you if you try to take control. Zelensky then sacked 2 or 3 people who were aligned with Zaluzhny in his government. Major ministers were sacked who were Zaluzhnyites. So this is going on right now. While Avdiivka is going down, and they're continuing to send men into the field to get mowed down or really blown up by Russian artillery. There have been just the saddest, most pathetic, most heart-wrenching videos of Ukrainian conscripts. I think Max Blumenthal showed one on Twitter. Like a whole room, a hall full of new recruits into the military, people who've just been brought into the military. Every one of them was at least my age. There is a bill in the Ukrainian parliament right now to expand the draft age from 17, or the range from 17 to 70. I said this before. I mean, every video I see now of Ukrainian troops, there's gray beards on soldiers in trenches. That is then, and you're going to like this, Michael Weimer. They are now sending significant numbers of women into the front lines. We now have women doing trench warfare. They had snipers for a while. There were women who were fighting on the front lines, but mostly as snipers. Maybe some, I don't think they even had tank drivers, but now they are actually in the trenches as infantry, carrying rifles across fields. And this in Russia, which, as everyone knows, is a traditional, the culture of Russia is very, traditional and patriarchal and all the good stuff. This is, for a lot of Russians, apparently, this is like the final confirmation that the regime in Ukraine is satanic, that they are sending young boys and women to fight and die. That's a satanic regime. So yeah, it's a fanatical regime. It's kind of what's left of Ukraine, the government, and it's people who are the original Banderites, the descendants of the Ukrainian Nazi, who was the kind of leader of the nationalist movement in Ukraine, who was an outright Nazi, fascist, anti-Russian, racist, and that's who Zaluzhny is. Zaluzhny he has 2 statues of Bandera in his office. He had, I forget, one of the Nazi insignia was on. He had a bracelet with Nazi insignia, but he's a Banderite. There's no doubt about that. Zelensky is just basically like a front guy they put in there to make them look good because he was Jewish, etc., and a comedian. But the right wing, the ultra nationalists, basically the Nazis in Ukraine, they're big in the military, not so much in the civilian government. That's Zelensky's job. But they are threatening, as they always have, to off Zelensky. It's been commonly assumed that they've always held that threat over him. And that's why he's taken particular hardline policies on Russia, because they wanted to go hard always. This has been their war. It's been these Ukrainian nationalist Nazis. That's been their war. And then mostly, but it's been Victoria Nuland's war too. And they found themselves as partners and waged this war to weaken Russia and to try to destroy Putin, which of course didn't work. So yeah, we have 200,000 to 500,000 dead men. The people in the Donbass and Crimea live under the government they overwhelmingly wanted to live under, speaking the language. They're allowed to speak the language, Russian, that they wanted to speak. The Kiev regime was forcing Ukrainian onto them. So why do we need to kill all these people for this? It's really amazing. But it's also amazing to see all the pro-Ukrainian types on Twitter and in politics try to frame it as if they weren't lying the entire time about Ukraine winning. I mean, every day we were told about how Ukraine was just kicking ass on the Russians, and it was just a matter of minutes before Ukraine was going to be victorious and Russia was going to collapse and Putin was going to be assassinated. And I mean, and we all knew, anybody who followed it seriously knew that Ukraine was actually losing constantly, and had no way of winning unless the United States sent its own troops in on the ground. So the lies and the boosterism, just
at this point, the gaslighting, now it's okay to say that the war is lost. Now that we've deemed it okay to say, yeah, Morning Joe a few weeks ago came to that conclusion that the war is unwinnable, and yeah, the Wall Street Journal piece and all these pieces in establishment media saying we did our best, but it's unwinnable, when they could have been on our side 18 months ago when we were called Putin apologists and stooges and all that.
Yeah,
saying the truth the whole time.
Yeah, when Joe Scarborough changes his mind on something, and then there's a policy shift is coming. I mean, really, his wife Mika and co-host is the daughter of Leonid Brzezinski. I mean, this is the guy. These are people with some deep connections. They know kind of what's going on there in the Democratic Party, in the White House. Yeah. So, yeah, it's here's the other thing. So, Mark Sloboda, who was on my show a while, like a year ago, super smart analyst of this, and he's like super pro Rush. He's actually pro. He wears a Z pin on his lapel, but a really, really sharp analyst. Anyway, he says that, and he has no reason to want this, he thinks the Ukraine regime is not going to give up for a long time. In other words, that this war is going to go on for, he thinks, years, which is so revolting to think about.
Zelensky said that the Ukrainian government has the right to kill Putin, and has given the Russian government an ultimatum of the end of 2024 to oust Putin. So a year from now, they're planning on extending this conflict at the very least.
Jesus. Yeah, right. I mean, it's surprising that Zelensky is doing this. I expected him to be gone by now. Well, I predicted he'd be gone by the end of this year, calendar year. He still could be. I still might be right about that, because he's not an ideologue. As far as I can tell, Zaluzhny is. And again, a lot of these people in the military very much are. And, if they want to fight, go right ahead. You go get mowed down by Russian snipers. So I'm surprised he's hanging on, because he has so many golden parachutes available, I'm sure, that he could get. He's already rich, as stinking rich. I think he's been, grafting money for years. But they're going to keep going. And I just start to think about like the Slavic consciousness or something, like these people, these particular Slavs. There is just a cold, hard, ruthless, merciless culture among certain sectors of Russia and Ukraine. It's just true. Not all of them, but I think that's who's fighting. I think it's those people with that Slavic culture. Again, people who have been in countries that have been in the biggest wars in human history for the last 100 years. I mean, again and again and again. So it's not surprising that they have that kind of culture. Just a culture of war, similar to the Israeli culture. People always at war. And that's, I think, who is fighting, in this war in Ukraine. But I don't know. I can't believe it's going to go for years longer. And the country is just destroyed.
Yeah, I think, what was it, NATO? Yeah, NATO ministers pledged to support Ukraine as long as it takes. Foreign ministers from NATO countries pledged to support Ukraine as long as it takes in a meeting of the Ukraine NATO Council in Brussels just yesterday. This was kind of my prediction, in that they're so dug in and they're not going to back down from their rhetoric, and they're just going to keep fighting this to the last Ukrainian.
Right. It's fanatics, and I think it's a small portion of the Ukrainian population. I mean, I bet you it's less than 10%. In fact, we know that. I mean, the right-wing parties get about 10% of the vote overall, something like that. Yeah, that's who's running this thing. I mean, and everybody else has left the country. What is it, like 8 or 10 million people just left? Hundreds of thousands of military-age men left. That's also why they're sending old men and women into the field. There is now, this is a really good one. There are now calls among certain highly placed Ukrainian officials, I believe, like government people, and I think some Ukrainian intellectuals, who are saying, so now there's like maybe even 1 million young Ukrainian men in Europe now who left, who draft dodgers, basically. There are many people in Ukraine now saying that NATO and the EU should round up all those men and take them back to Ukraine and conscript them and send them to the front lines. And I mean, I almost wish they would try that, because I'm pretty sure that would end the thing. I mean, there would be I almost wish they would do that, because that would be such a grotesque violation of every purported Western value there is. And it would be you think Gaza's bad optics for the West? I mean, rounding up young men and putting them into cattle cars and sending them to the front line to die, that's not going to look good. So, but that's where they are. I mean, that's a rational proposal at this point, right? If you're Ukraine, if you're in the government of Ukraine, this is the only way you're going to survive at all, is to go snatch those guys and force them to fight. I mean, it's not a good recipe. That's how desperate they are. It's so pathetic this is still going on. And by the way, American aid continues to flow. I mean, there's no sign. They're going to send them less money and less weapons, but still going to send them stuff. Looks like. I mean, it looks like you have clear, solid majorities in Congress saying that they are, as you said, we're in this forever. We will support them for as long as it takes. There's so few people in Congress who oppose this thing. And so it's just going to be another zombie war, another American zombie, this time a proxy. It's a zombie proxy war. Lovely. Here's the other thing that's wonderful about this war. Lots of cool new technologies have been invented and deployed for the first time because of this war, in this war. So you know what they have now? They just deployed for the first time. I'm not even sure which side this is. I think it's Ukraine. A drone aircraft carrier. So it's a giant drone with really big wings, and it has multiple drones parked on the wings, and those deploy when this thing is in air. So it just becomes like this scatter effect of drones, each maybe with missiles on it, or I don't know. So that's been killing a lot of people. But this is also fun. Princess Diana, she devoted like much of her political energy to a pretty good cause, actually, which was to eliminate landmines, which were being deployed a lot in the 1980s, especially in Africa and somewhere in the Middle East. So we actually ended up banning a lot of them. And there have been conventions that have banned landmines, and there've been a lot of landmine clearing because of that. Nope, they just brought them right back. So both sides, I think, both Ukraine and Russia, extensively just put landmines all over the battlefield. And that right now, I think, accounts for like a solid chunk of the casualties. So that means you got a lot of limbless, legless guys if they survive it.
Oh, and well, Ukraine is just going to be a minefield for decades, like Vietnam was. Yeah.
And there's that. Yeah. Not to mention unexploded ordnance,
If peace ever resumes in that area, little children are going to be playing in their backyards and going to be mutilated by.
This is
Yeah.
this is why Diana. This is why she was into that. Yeah, because that's what was becoming known. Then kids were like playing around. They'd in some field in Sudan, and boom. Okay. All right. What should we talk about to take us out? Let's lighten the mood.
Yeah. Well, there's two other great men that have ascended in the last week. One being Conor McGregor and the other being Elon Musk.
They ascended?
Well,
I wish Conor would ascend.
Conor McGregor publicly denounced the Irish government in their handling of murders and the hate speech laws, and has said that he understands the rage behind the riots that occurred in Ireland. And a lot of people are speculating that this will lead to him being a galvanizing populist figure in Ireland, and that he could be the one person to restore an Irish sense of national identity to Irish politics. Like, people are hoping for that.
Oof. Well, I have many things to say because I have a lot to say about Conor McGregor. I have a lot to say about the issue, yada yada. Yeah, I mean, I've said this before, right? About my thing about Conor McGregor. So yeah, I mean, I've been involved pretty deeply in martial arts and combat sports for 12, 15 years, something like that. And he should be banned entirely from the sport. He should be banned from all gyms, combat sport gyms. He shouldn't be allowed in gyms. He shouldn't ever be allowed to compete because of what he did. I mean, he basically tried to kill some people. And he's done it multiple times. And he's a violent, out of control, basically criminal who probably should be in jail. I mean, he's attacked and over pathetic, petty little issues too. These were the farthest thing from self-defense, right? He felt like insulted by someone, so he threw a steel dolly through a window of a bus, and he cut Michael Chiesa's face and almost killed Rose Namajunas. And I mean, no, the guy is a piece of shit and a danger. So like him lecturing on anyone about violence in the streets, no matter what it is. But yeah.
We've gone through this before, but my position on that is that dolly did sell a lot of pay-per-view buys.
And whenever I get like moralistic and highfalutin, you always bring me back to the real center, baby. I love it. No, let's keep it real, Michael. Yeah. Nonetheless, okay. I still don't want. I mean, the idea of the guy being a political leader is scary, and especially if you're talking about him being the prime minister of Dublin. The Taoiseach, they have this special name for the prime minister in Ireland. I did notice that he took what I would call a very liberal, like immigration reform position, which is that, so if people don't know, apparently some Algerian immigrant guy who lived in Ireland for many years, for some reason, stabbed a bunch of children and people in front of a school, I think. I don't think anyone's died, but they're in critical condition. Sounds terrible, no doubt about it. And then there was a riot immediately after that. And the energy, as far as I could tell, for the riot was about the police not protecting citizens from criminals in general, but it was really an anti-immigrant, right, sentiment going on. People were saying, and I think this is largely true, there's just been a lot of crime in Ireland by immigrants, a lot of violent crime. And I know that there recently, a year ago, I looked into this actually, I think it was about a year ago. There were several, 2 or 3 horrific murders, like horror movie murders of gay men. And I think it was who you might think it was.
It was an Iraqi immigrant for the gay stabbing, for the gay killing. Yeah.
There was a beheading too.
Yeah.
Or even, I think there might have been more than one beheading. Every religion has its fanatics. I mean, yes, and Muslim and Islam has its fair share, no doubt about it. But and especially when you have fanatics among poor people, that's a bad mix. But yeah, so the riots are basically saying, I thought, kick the immigrants out. Conor comes in, and his statement, I have to say, as policy, it's not terrible, of course. I mean, I'm basically an open borders guy, but this doesn't make me upset. He's just calling for more screening of immigrants. Now, the devil's in the details as to what kind of screening, but, to screen out like criminal histories. Sure. I mean, I absolutely would be for that. In fact, I think we do that anyway. So there's nothing wrong with that. My guess is that Conor got some advice from somebody about what to say politically. I bet he paid some people to like be his PR team for this, because he is the guy, and this is the other reason that Conor McGregor should be no one's hero, is that if you follow the sport, you know that he had a huge fight with Khabib. What was that, 2 or 3 years ago?
Oh, that was like 2018 now, 5 years ago.
5 years ago?
Yeah.
And leading up to the fight for weeks, months and months and months, Conor McGregor was taunting Khabib in ways that I still can't believe. He called him and his family terrorists and said that they should be denied entry into the United States, or, Muslim terrorists. Khabib proceeded to kick the shit out of him, and it was a beautiful thing. And then there was a huge fight after the fight, which is even more beautiful because Conor and his boys all got their asses kicked even further by Khabib and his boys. And oh man, yeah. As a great thing, because Dylan Dennis, remember that? Dylan Dennis was part of the Conor McGregor team.
Yeah, he was the one who instigated the post-fight brawl.
Dylan Dennis is another person who should be banned from the sport entirely. Although he's not as bad as Conor McGregor, but he's a terrible human being for a lot of reasons. But
he sells pay-per-view buys.
Yeah, if you have a bullshit promotion like what is it called, the Logan Paul nonsense. But yeah, so it was Dylan Dennis and Conor McGregor getting their asses handed to them by all these Dagestani guys. Don't fuck with Dagestanis. That's all I know. All right, man.
Yeah.
We have a Black Friday sale. 2 more days. Check it out, guys. Go to unregisteredacademy.com. 25% off all the annual memberships, which breaks down to, like, if you do the streaming video, it's like only $9 a month. And if you do the live and streaming, which gets you all the videos, plus you get to be in the classes, I think it's 20, low 20s, something like 22 a month. It's on there anyway. You can see. So yeah, check that out. Unregisteredacademy.com. We also have now departments. We have a politics department, a history department, geopolitics department, and a philosophy department. And very shortly, I will be announcing our next course, which is on, you don't even know this. I just decided this week. We're going to do the Quran, which is one of my favorite things to teach. I taught it at Columbia, and it's very surprising. So that, of course, will be coming out soon. And then, yeah, go there. There's the URL. Thank you, sir. And then right now, we are going to another place. We're going to Unregistered Live, which is for patrons of the show, of Unregistered and Unreported. And if you want to become a patron and hang out with us on Zoom after every Thursday, go to patreon.com/unregistered, sign up at any level and click the link there, and we'll see you in the Zoom room right now. Michael, this has been awesome. Thank you, man.
Yeah. Man, CM Punk returned to WWE, and I just wanted to tail end that.
All right.
Just
poor guy.
Yeah.
The worst fighter in UFC history, but yeah, I like him though.
Sells pay-per-views.
For real. For real, it's a business.
Yeah, yep. Once, like, there's the honor of fighting, and then there's the honor of the craft and everything. But once you get to the point to where you're in the fight business, the only thing that matters is how many pay-per-views you can sell.
Correct. Yeah. Unfortunately, sometimes, yes, it's correct. All right, man. Peace.
One more thing.
One more thing.
Pointed out the exec you were talking about was Lior Cohen.
Lior Cohen. That's right. Thank you. Yeah, Lior, Lior Cohen.
Ly. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Right. Lior Cohen. Yeah. Check him out. He's a huge mocker, they call it. He's the man. All right. We good?
Yeah, we're good. Peace.
Peace.
See ya.